Welcome to the post-retirement employment video. This presentation will provide you an overview of when, how, and if you can return to work after you retire. Before we begin, let's go over a couple of housekeeping items. We've provided a presentation notes and resources document to help you follow along and reference later. You'll find the link for the document in the YouTube description box. We won't be responding to questions during the presentation due to the large number of participants. If you have questions, please contact us directly. Today, we'll cover several important topics. First, we'll discuss what it means to work for a non-CalPERS employer after retirement. Next, we'll review the rules for returning to work with a CalPERS employer as a retiree. We'll then touch on reinstatement from retirement and conclude with available tools and resources. So what happens if you're retired and want to go back to work for a non-CalPERS covered employer? As a retiree under a regular retirement, what we call a service retirement, you can be self-employed, work in a private industry for a company that isn't a CalPERS employer without restrictions and continue to receive your monthly allowance, work for an employer that qualifies you for a membership in another California retirement system. There are no limitations or restrictions for these options, and your CalPERS pension won't be affected. An example would be a teaching position covered by California State Teachers Retirement System, CalSTRS. If you retire under a disability or industrial disability retirement, you can work for an employer that isn't covered by CalPERS and still receive your CalPERS retirement allowance. You can be self-employed, work for a private industry employer, work for an employer that qualifies you for membership in another retirement system, or for a non-CalPERS employer, and will continue to receive your pension. Keep in mind that there may be some medical restrictions that apply. If you decide to work for a non-CalPERS covered employer, please note that your CalPERS retirement allowance may be subject to applicable limitations. Any job you take must be significantly different from your previous position, and you cannot perform duties or activities you were restricted from due to your disability retirement. If you work in a similar role to the one from which you were found disabled, CalPERS may review your situation and you could be reinstated from retirement. If you retired due to a disability and are under the minimum service retirement age of 50, 52, or 55, you must report your gross earnings to CalPERS monthly or quarterly. Also, the combined total of your employer-paid portion of your monthly retirement allowance and your new gross earnings cannot exceed the current compensation for your position you retired from. If your total earnings surpass this amount, your retirement allowance will be reduced dollar for dollar. Once you reach the minimum service retirement age, this earnings limit no longer applies. If you have industrial disability retirement from a CalPERS employer, your retirement allowance is not subject to an earnings limit, even if you're under the minimum service retirement age. So what happens if you're retired and want to go back to work for a CalPERS covered employer? An alternative to service retirement and working as a retired annuitant is partial service retirement. This benefit is available to full-time state miscellaneous, full-time state industrial, and full-time public agency employees whose employer contracts for this benefit. Partial service retirees are not subject to working after retirement rules. So how does this benefit work? With employer approval, an employee who meets eligibility requirements can reduce their work time by at least 20%, but not more than 60%, and receive a retirement allowance for the balance. For more information about partial service retirement, contact your employer and ask if they contract for this benefit. You can also refer to our publication, A Guide to Your CalPERS Partial Service Retirement, Pub 14. Under a service retirement, there are 3 ways you could go back to work for a CalPERS employer: as a retired annuitant, as an independent contractor, or by terminating and returning to active employment, also known as reinstatement from retirement, which we'll cover later. As a CalPERS retiree, you can work for a CalPERS covered employer under certain conditions. The general term for this is retired annuitant, which simply means a CalPERS retiree who returns to work for a CalPERS employer while continuing to receive retirement benefits. However, there are specific restrictions and requirements that must be followed to maintain your retirement benefits. Also, your employment must be in a position that's limited in duration. If you would like to be appointed to a permanent position, like any regular staff job, whether it's part-time, full-time, intermittent, or seasonal, you would need to be reinstated from retirement. There are some exceptions, so it's a good idea to check the guidelines for working after disability retirement or industrial disability retirement. You can work for a CalPERS employer without reinstatement if the position is specifically designated for retired annuitants, such as extra help retired annuitant or certain interim vacant roles, but there are restrictions. As a retired annuitant, you won't earn any additional service credit or retirement benefits from this employment. Also keep in mind that eligibility requirements can vary depending on the retirement type, whether it's service, disability, or industrial disability. Remember, if you're appointed to a permanent position, you must be reinstated from retirement. There are two types of retired annuitant employment. 1, extra help. 2, interim vacant position employment. Examples of extra help positions include eliminating a backlog, working on a special project, or work in excess of what regular staff can do. If it's a vacant unique position, such as a city manager or police chief, you can work in an interim appointment during the employer's recruitment for a permanent hire. In this case, you cannot work until after the employer has opened a recruitment for a permanent replacement. You cannot be employed in any regular staff position such as seasonal, permanent intermittent, exempt from civil service, or any other temporary position other than a retired annuitant position. So, your position is exempt from restrictions by CalPERS law. The hours you work cannot exceed 960 hours in a fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th, for employment with all CalPERS employers combined. There are no exceptions to this limit. You and your employer are responsible for tracking your hours to ensure you don't exceed this limitation. The hourly pay rate you receive cannot be less than the minimum or exceed the maximum paid to other employees performing comparable duties as listed in the employer's publicly available pay schedule. Calculate your hourly pay rate by taking the monthly salary and dividing it by 173.33. You cannot receive any benefit, incentives, compensation in lieu of benefits, or other forms of compensation in addition to the hourly pay rate. For example, vacation benefits cannot be provided to a retired annuitant. Before applying for work with any employer, it is your responsibility to ask if they contract with CalPERS for retirement benefits and inform them that you are a CalPERS retiree. When asking, you should also specify if you're retired on a service, disability, or industrial disability retirement. To return to work with a CalPERS employer and remain retired, you must apply directly with the employer for a designated retired annuitant position. The employer is responsible for determining whether to hire you for the position. Once hired, both you and your employer share a responsibility for ensuring employment remains compliant with CalPERS laws and regulations. It's important to understand and follow these requirements so your retirement benefits are not affected. On top of the restrictions we just discussed, there are 2 additional eligibility requirements you must meet. You are not allowed to return to work for a period of 180 days after you retire. The waiting period begins on your retirement date. There are specific exceptions listed in our Employment After Retirement publication, which is publication 33. For example, if before you begin work, Your employer certifies the nature of the employment and that the job is necessary to fill a critically needed position sooner than 180 days. Also, the governor may authorize additional exceptions through an executive order. In addition to the 180-day wait period, there's a bona fide separation of service requirement which we must comply with in order to maintain our tax-qualified status as a 401(a) defined benefit plan. What is a bona fide separation as a retired annuitant? A bona fide separation applies if you're younger than your normal retirement age. When we talk about normal retirement age, we're talking about the oldest age listed for all of your retirement benefit formulas, up to age 62. This means if you retired under a 2% at 55 formula, your normal retirement age is 55. Or if you retired under the 2% at 62 formula, then your normal retirement age is 62. So, if you retired younger than your normal retirement age, the following two conditions must be met. You can't have a verbal or written agreement to return to work between you and any CalPERS employer before you retired, and you must have a separation in service of 60 days between your retirement date and the date your employment as a retired annuitant begins. All retirees who are under the normal retirement age at retirement must meet the bona fide separation in service requirements, even if an exception to the 180-day wait period applies. These two requirements may be served at the same time. The only exception to meeting this bona fide separation is during a declared state of emergency. For example, disasters due to floods, earthquakes, or worldwide pandemic. There are specific exceptions listed in our publication, Employment After Retirement, Pub 33. Service and disability retirees can log into their MyCalPERS account to view the expiration date of their 180-day waiting period. They can also access their retirement letter, which includes information about the 180-day waiting period. In addition to all the rules and restrictions we mentioned before, those retired on a disability or industrial disability retirement are also subject to additional requirements and restrictions. Your employment must be in a position significantly different from the one you retired from and cannot include duties or activities you were previously restricted from performing at the time of your retirement. If you retired on a disability and are under your minimum service retirement age, you'll be subject to an earnings limit. Your minimum service retirement age depends on when you are hired in an active CalPERS employment with your employer and is either 50, 52, or 55. Once you've reached the minimum service retirement age, your employment after retirement is no longer subject to the earnings limit. Those retired on an industrial disability retirement are not subject to an earnings limit for work as a retired annuitant. Disability and industrial disability retirees may have the additional option of working for a CalPERS employer in a permanent capacity. Again, your job duties should differ significantly from those required in the position for which you were retired. The position should not be the same position or in the same member classification. To work in this capacity, you must receive our approval first. There are forms that must be submitted and will need a copy of the prospective position's duty statement. You can find the forms on our website. If you're approved to work, you'll be required to report your earnings to us, and your retirement will be subject to an earnings limit. Another way you may be able to work after retirement is as an independent contractor. You can be employed as an independent contractor, a consultant, or an employee of a third-party employer, including your own business without restrictions, if there is no common law employer-employee relationship between you and the CalPERS employer. If the work you'll perform is the same or similar to the work you performed as an active employee, or is work performed by an active employee of that employer, an employer-employee relationship exists, and the employment is subject to the retired annuitant restrictions. If you believe that you're working as an independent contractor and it's later determined that you are actually an employee and the employment violates any of the retired annuitant restrictions, your retirement will be terminated. Independent contractors are not employees and are excluded from membership in CalPERS. A true independent contractor, consultant, or third-party employee is someone who contracts to provide a service or complete a specific task. We use many factors to determine whether a position is truly an independent contractor position, including the manner and means in which the work is accomplished. Before you begin employment as an independent contractor, send the proposed independent contractor service agreement to us for review. We'll review the contract within 60 days. After you retire, you may serve as a true volunteer for a CalPERS employer. The position that is never paid. You cannot volunteer to work in a compensated position where somebody is normally paid for those duties. You cannot volunteer to avoid meeting any of the working after retirement restrictions. We've just talked about some of the rules and restrictions for working after retirement, so you may be wondering what happens if your employment violates any of these rules. Any retiree employment found to be in violation of the retirement laws and regulations is unlawful employment. This will result in your mandatory reinstatement from retirement, retroactive to the date the unlawful employment began. If reinstated, your retirement allowance, pension payments will stop, and you will be required to reimburse CalPERS the amount of retirement allowance you received during the period of unlawful employment. In addition, you will pay your employer the member contribution plus interest owed retroactive to your reinstatement date. The employer who unlawfully employed you will submit your member contributions and pay employer contributions plus interest owed retroactive to your reinstatement date. Before you start working, we strongly encourage you to read the Employment After Retirement publication, which is publication 33. This publication will provide more details and information not given in this presentation. I just stated that reinstatement can be a consequence of unlawful employment after retirement, but there are times when you may want to voluntarily reinstate into active employment. You may decide that you want to return to work full-time and no longer remain retired. If so, you can choose to reinstate. Reinstatement means coming out of retirement and returning to work for a CalPERS employer as a permanent employee. As a reinstated employee, you will receive a regular paycheck, earn severance credit, and make contributions to CalPERS just as you did before retiring. Once you reinstate, your retirement allowance will stop, and you will not receive retirement benefits again until you retire at a future date. If you're reinstating from service retirement into active employment, are currently working as a retired annuitant, and want to accept a permanent position with another CalPERS covered employer, you must notify your current employer. You can't be an active permanent employee and a retired annuitant at the same time. You must have a firm start or hire date from the CalPERS employer. Your employment start date is the first day you actually return to work. You also need to submit the Reinstatement from Service Retirement application form, which you can find on our website under Forms and Publications. Prior approval is not needed before you start working. Once we receive your completed application, we will confirm your start date with your employer and provide you written confirmation of your retirement end date and reinstatement start date. If your start date changes or you decide not to return to work and you've already returned your reinstatement application, you must notify us immediately to avoid any disruption in your benefit payments. If you retired on a disability or industrial disability, you must have approval from CalPERS before you can reinstate to any CalPERS covered employer. The reinstatement process can take 3 to 6 months depending on how complete your reinstatement application packet is and whether you will be sent for an independent medical examination. You may request a specific reinstatement date, but the effective date of the employment cannot be prior to the date of CalPERS approval. You must submit the Reinstatement from Disability, Industrial Disability Retirement Application form. It can be found on our website under Forms and Publications. The reinstatement process and required documentation varies depending on the employer you retired from and what position and employer you want to work for. You can review our publication, A Guide to CalPERS Reinstatement from Retirement, Pub 37, for more information on what other forms and documents will be required. You should be aware that if you reinstate, then retire again, your new retirement may not include the same benefits you had with your previous retirement. If you currently have CalPERS retiree health coverage and reinstate, that coverage will be canceled when you reinstate. You'll need to enroll as an active employee for health benefits with your new employer or obtain other health coverage. You may be eligible to resume your retiree health coverage from the employer you previously retired from if you meet all of the following requirements. 1. You are eligible for CalPERS retiree health coverage before you reinstate. 2. Your first employer's health premium contribution amount is higher than the new employer. 3. You re-retire within 120 days of separating from employment with the new employer. 4. You notify us in writing within 60 days of your new retirement date or during open enrollment that you want to receive health benefits from the employer you first retired from. You should ask your prospective new employer and us if you'll be eligible for retiree health coverage when you re-retire. If you received a golden handshake, which adds years of service credit to your calculation as an incentive to retire, this benefit is lost when you reinstate and will not be included in your calculation when you re-retire. This could cause your future retirement benefits to be lower than your current retirement allowance. Cost of living adjustments, COLA, are typically paid beginning the second calendar year after you retire and compound annually. The longer you've been retired, the higher the compounded factor. When you reinstate and then re-retire, your COLA is paid the second calendar year after your new retirement date and is based on your new retirement benefit. You do not retain the compounded factor from your previous retirement. This could cause your future benefit to be lower. Reciprocity is an agreement among public retirement systems to allow members to move from one qualified public retirement system to another qualified system without losing some valuable retirement and related benefit rights. One of the advantages of reciprocity is we can use the other retirement system's higher pay rate to calculate your CalPERS retirement benefit as long as you retire on the same date. If you retired with reciprocity and we use the other system's salaries to calculate your CalPERS retirement benefit, reinstatement breaks the concurrent retirement. This means your CalPERS retirement will be based on your CalPERS salaries when you re-retire. There are other things that can be impacted by your reinstatement, including unused sick leave conversion calculations, current temporary annuity benefits, and current community property claims on your retirement allowance. So we highly encourage you to read our Reinstatement from Retirement Pub 37. This publication also includes re-retirement calculation examples and more. Now, to close out our time, I want to mention that this presentation, along with many of our other videos, is available on our YouTube channel. You can get to it through calpers.ca.gov or by visiting youtube.com/calpers. Our presentation today was intended to provide you information on post-retirement employment. Please note that CalPERS is governed by the Public Employees Retirement Law. The information in this presentation is general. The retirement law is complex and subject to change. If there is a conflict between the law and the information presented in this presentation, all decisions will be based on the law. Later today, you'll receive an email with a short evaluation. Please answer all the questions as it's important for us to get your feedback to help us improve these presentations. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to attend this presentation and have a great day.